Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm excited about our episode today. Before I introduce our guest, here is quote: defend. Always support your teammates by upholding the process, procedure, and values of the Guardian culture. The D in Guardian. Guardian Roofing and Siding. Our guest today, founder, Guardian Roofing and Siding, steward of the culture, friend to the Culture Matters podcast, you know, um, mentor as it relates to my journey in faith. And I believe I'm not alone in that. If you know Robert Frehafer, you're likely challenged and convicted to look in the mirror. Thanks for coming back to the Culture Matters podcast.
Thanks for having me, Jay. Good morning.
So I have I should have said in the intro, we're doing like kind of a play on words here. Like, what's the opposite of the value defend? And so the value was always support your teammates by upholding the process, procedure, and values of the Guardian culture. So I tried to write down what I think the opposite of that is, things I see, I've experienced, and here it is: selling above all paperwork. Ha, someone else will do it. Culture, isn't that just about beanbags and free lunches? Those are things that I've heard people say, and those are things that I've observed, and shamefully willing to admit before I learned, just selling. Yeah, somebody else to do all those details. I'm prideful, about my sale, and they can't do what I can do, so I'm just going to focus on the sales, and just the team will figure out the rest. That's their job. Totally have experienced that, and a bit of part of cultures that was the case. So that's what comes to mind in the opposite of this value of Guardian Roofing and Siding. What do you think? And then did you have one you wanted to share?
Yeah, I did write one down, but I think it's an interesting take. It's different than the way that I was viewing it based off of my interpretation of the defend portion of it and how it applies in the non-inverse world, right? Like, so I do like this idea of looking at the opposite of the value and kind of this play on words to write it out. But and I definitely understand that mindset and have been part of cultures that the mindset is simply I sell and I'm not responsible for the paperwork. I don't handle that stuff. That's someone else's job. I haven't I haven't been part of a culture that says like, oh, culture, what's that? Beanbags and free lunches. But I can understand it because I think of like tech companies or something like that where they have these great, awesome things that people go and enjoy. So I can get that. I can understand that part of it. I think it is being spread more, that concept of the like really cool stuff. Now the flip side of that is that it's it's I get the impression that you're saying like it's not even authentic. Like, oh, we're just gonna throw some beanbags out and some from the standpoint of the salesperson, let's say, that's saying, I'm a great salesperson and I do all this. It when you talk about it, it sounds as if it's a very self-centered, prideful, ego-driven salesperson that doesn't want to be responsible for the details, the paperwork, the shared team responsibilities, and more than likely would think that they pay for those beanbags and free lunches, so they're actually the ones supporting all of that. And when I say these things, it's not like I'm pointing the finger in a judgmental standpoint, because as an organization, there's been times and seasons where sales reps have come in and they've exampled the poor habits of not doing paperwork properly, not answering the phone to even answer the questions or responding to emails when the production staff is trying to get stuff installed, or if there's issues that arise, they literally keep moving on to the next one. I do think that we could probably land here for a little while, because this is something that it's multifaceted. I don't believe it's only ego and thinking that they're better than someone. I think that, based off of my own experience in sales, there's when my experience is that there's so many variables going on. There's emotional, fear of loss with the client. You have to stay on top of that. You drive and push. So I drove and pushed so hard that I was spent. I didn't really have that energy. So I had some compassion on other sales reps when they went into a little bit of a recluse. That was kind of my MO for some time, like work really hard, make great numbers, and then take a break, even if it's for a half of a day or a day, something like that. Now it definitely gets exaggerated. I've seen it in other sales reps where it could be seasonally, right? Like they come through seasonal depression, the snow comes in, like all these different types of things where they just spend themselves so much, they burn themselves out with family, like not being there for their family, not taking care of their health, not doing the things that they should do. And then it's like this rubber band effect where they're like, that's it. I'm not selling. I'm not doing these things again. Like, so I say all this stuff from experience for myself and experience working around other successful in that capacity of numbers salespeople. So there's a lot to this concept. And that could be a view from a production side, or process driven side of operations, like, oh, the sales reps don't care, they just want to do whatever and dump it all on us to figure out and do all the real work, the heavy lifting of getting this project installed, or this whatever widget that the company utilizes done. So I get
Hmm.
that concept. There's also a lot of personality traits that I've found, it's not an absolute, but at different degrees, where sales reps are very emotional people. So they'll chase that good feeling of the sale and the conquering and the creation of that, but they don't really have also the skill. So you have that emotional side where they're driven like that. They're making the connection and making the deal, let's say. But then there's this like skill level, or attention to detail where they may miss things. And then when for them to sit down and write out all the paperwork and do all those types of things can be a drain for them. It doesn't feel good, and they avoid it, right? And then it's that avoidance, and you taught me this. It's that avoidance that compounds, that makes you want to do it even less, and then go back out and get a good feeling from the sale or from whatever else it is. So there's a lot that's wrapped up inside of that, the way that you've laid it out. So I have a few thoughts. That's the
What
start of
about
them.
the idea that if sales and operations don't communicate often enough, that feeling of either of them or both of them simultaneously feeling as though the other is taking advantage, that happens naturally. So, in the absence of in the absence of consistent communication, what if that happens where sales thinks ops is not doing enough, right? It's falling on them, or ops is feeling sales is not doing enough. It's all falling on them. I'm curious what you think when I put it that way, or propose that potential scenario, or if you've ever observed something to that effect, or if you have thoughts around the speculation that could be. Because I'm making that, I'm saying, what if, in the absence of consistent communication, both parties feel the same way about the other, that it's all on them and the other isn't doing enough?
I would say I do say that, yes, It absolutely happens. In many companies that I've worked, my whole career in construction, I would say that was the concept from inside the office and installation side. It's like, man, what did this sales rep sell? What how are they allowed to sell this like this? Like, I could just remember like building sunrooms, and it was the craziest design on the back of a house that makes zero sense. But from a build, and then you have to build it, right? You just have to make it work. That was a challenge. And then inside, when I moved into the office with them and in project management, then it was like in the middle, right? Because the installers were complaining, like, they can't do this, this isn't right. The sales reps were like, the perception was almost like they were avoiding these things, or like, hey, I'm doing the best that I can do. I'm getting these sales, I'm going out and getting them. And then the office staff was kind of like, I would say annoyed, but pampering to the sales reps in whatever it is, because they wanted to keep them moving and moving forward and feeling good about what they're doing. So there was like this accepted um challenge. I remember working at a home security company. I was a salesperson, and there was issues between sales and install. And it just seemed as if like every different place that I've worked with, when it's an installation company and a sales and marketing company, it's almost like two separate wings of the building, and they don't truly communicate in any regular fashion. And I do believe that that unknowingly of what each person goes through, because the operations are thinking like they just drive around, they talk to a couple people, they sell a job a week or two jobs a week, and they barely work about salespeople. And then salespeople are thinking like, those guys, they get to sit in the office all day. They don't have to go out and do anything. They don't have to deal. They have a guaranteed paycheck. They could just go out. If it gets done, it doesn't get done. They don't really care. They don't understand the struggles of the office staff, as well as the install side of all the challenges that they come up to every single day. And so it's not an if. I think I've seen it all the time. And it's something that I've always dealt with in Guardian, because as a small company, I was the leader of the company. There was an operations manager for years that, and he's still there, just changed title, but he and I would kind of bump heads often. And I knew all these like struggles and challenges that the sales reps were having, and I would be lenient on them. And then the sales would be kind of complaining to me like, hey, what about this and what about that? We need this thing handled. We need this thing figured out. And I would understand the challenges that ops was having, right? So I was like, kind of, uh, I would say, in poor example of character in the beginning, playing both sides of the fence, not wanting to reveal the challenges from each side to each other, keep all the parts and pieces moving forward. But what I wasn't aware of is that it was almost like, I do believe that each party, sales and ops, could see what was going on, right? And rather than bring them together to hash it out, because every time I would do that, it was like very explosive because of lack of communication, and having people that were not even clear communicators in the first place, very emotional, responsive, you know, emotionally challenged, or immature people, as so many people are. And I'm not pointing a finger, me too, right? I'm in that camp. It was a challenge as a leader to keep things moving forward and keep people, what I would say, happy, right? Because that was my goal as a people pleaser. I'd want people to be happy. And I would have to have some of those tough conversations. And often I would wait too long before having them. So yeah, I've seen that. I would say like the flip side of that, the positive side, is regular communication, having the sales rep out on the job regularly to see what the challenges are, education in the very beginning of what they're selling, how to sell it, what challenges to look out for, more communication between ops and sales, kind of a blended organization. And my mind goes back and forth. Sometimes I think like, all right, let's separate sales out from the operations more, because it is a challenge when the sales rep goes out to the job. If something's not happening exactly as they proposed it to the client, they get uncomfortable and they have to deal with that conflict. But it's something that I halfway want to protect them from, so they can just keep going to the next house and sell and feel good and move on. But so far, this is the way that I've landed, is to have the reps involved through the production. I do from a standpoint of processes and procedures and volume. I think that if it was separated out and the sales reps were just sitting in front of clients all day long selling, and then operations was brought up to a higher standard, that everything was getting completed because of clear communication, it is possible. I'm not saying it's a bad way to run the business, having sales separated out. It's just something that we have not made that switch. It's something that comes to my mind often, from a sheer volume standpoint, to have sales reps running that way. But in our business, when we're going out there, we're helping one homeowner after storm hits. We want to help the whole rest of the neighborhood around them. So it makes sense for the sales reps to be there. If it was a retail organization where we were just selling based off of the need for a new replacement, and sales reps in those scenarios often, they're traveling great distances, could be 2 hours between an appointment, running 2 or 3 appointments a day. So for them to be back and hanging out at the job site and then talking to neighbors, that could be, logistically challenging and less fruitful for them in that regard. So yeah, I have a lot of experience, I would say, with the non-talking. And it's still something that I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, this is great. It's something that still needs constant attention and communication. I just think at this point, I'm a little bit different, and all the guardians that work in the company, office and sales, they're different. The communication is different. The willingness to have conflict and talk about tough things, just at quicker, right away, handle it, and then squash things and ultimately, you know, get it so everything is good for the client and for the company as well. So yeah, I have a lot of experience in that stuff.
What do you think of this quote? The CEO's role is to get the people aware of the vision, enthusiastic about it, and talking with one another to improve it in perpetuity.
I think it's a great I think it's a great quote. One thing that rises up in my mind with that, I have a few things. One of them is that in some capacity, my view is that the CEO also needs to put in work, right? Because if it's just talking about the vision in some capacity, I don't know what that is exactly, but even if it's sometime with sales and training, sometimes with production and being at the job, and almost like an undercover boss, but not undercover, right? And out in the open boss, right? Like that goes out and sees what it is and has the conflict, like, yo, this isn't what I expected. This isn't what we talked about. This isn't the direction that we agreed upon. So that's one thing that rises up, is that in addition to, not in conflict of the statement, but then the other thing that rises up is somewhat a little bit more of a challenging thing to myself, because I really thought, there was utility in it. For years, I would say, like, maybe around like 2015, 2016, 2017. I felt like that was my job, to do that part. Like, but I was doing it. This is where, like, it's kind of like a negative experience, I would say. I was doing it from anxiety, like anxiousness, fear of missing out, having to keep people motivated, not trusting the people that were doing what they're doing. So then I would like be continually trying to motivate people to do what really works, but it was, and then I would feel like, man, I'm not working, right? Or I'm not in that capacity of sales or install or whatever. Like, so it's a real like mix of like awkwardness or anxiety and guilt. Like, really, not that I was ridden with that at all times, because if success would flow and I would still be there to answer questions and do stuff. But I don't think that I think that if I was giving all that I had to my role, I wouldn't have felt that same way. I think that I would have been more clear and connected with the sales reps and the operations. I think that I would have been through communication. It wouldn't have been like jump in, jump out, like, oh, the storm hit, we're here, we're going, and then step out. Now, again, it's not like I didn't work, but it was different. And even my awareness level or lack of awareness of what my role was actually was part of that, creating that anxiety and guilt. Like, oh, what am I supposed to be doing? Am I supposed to do this or that? And then not communicating. So what I found is through regular practice, because that's right around when we started talking, was 2018, going into 19. So basically, proactively, and I say this now, it's not like I got this right that moment, but having proactive meetings, proactive communication, proactive training, and I still feel like I'm in the very beginning stages of this, from an application standpoint. But there's just a lot of negative, I would say, a lot of past experiences that I don't think were handled due to my lack of awareness very well. And experientially, they sucked for me, right? Like, I was like, oh my gosh, we got to get everybody rolling and moving and doing all these things. And then I'd be reactively motivating. And I don't think it was always received so well. It worked, but I don't believe that it was received as well as proactive communication, because I wasn't able to listen well when people responded back. I wasn't able to navigate those discussions and make, changes. So that also rises up. But I agree wholeheartedly with the statement, in the right person. And if they're navigating it clearly, they have the vision, they have the plan. How they do it, timing, to who, when they listen to it, their counterparts, is very important. And then the action steps that follow, because that's another thing. In the past, I've said so many things like, yeah, this is it. And then boop, change directions. And oh my goodness, that creates a challenge, right? Like with everybody around me. And so it can create a lack of security for the team. If I'm like, yeah, we're doing this. Now it's one thing if you're going after a storm, you go to an area, you think it's something, but it's not, that's like reasonable. But if it's like, we're all going to be public adjusters, we're going to go get licensed, we're going to do all these things, and then 3 weeks later, we're not going to do that, we're all going to go be firemen, I don't know, whatever, right? Like, just, so these things can definitely shake up an organization. And for me, I wasn't aware that, like, spouting off all these things without talking to the right people first, like the leaders in the organization, getting feedback, understanding, considering before executing, then making a longer plan of action, and then executing on that through small, discipline steps over a period of time. So again, I agree with the statement, but and I understand that we can only say something in a certain, bit of time, and there's more to it, of course, but ultimately, it's still, we're going through a process right now, the CEO manual process. We've been going through this, I want to say, since, when would you say? I'm not even great with that. September, October,
Yep.
last year, right? And we're in a prologue of the process. We're not even into the process, right? To truly understand. So for me to even say, yes, that's what a CEO should do, because I'm a founder, right? I found the company, I've moved, I've grown, I've worked in it, and even to be prematurely say, yes, I'm the CEO, like, it doesn't even sound right this moment. Now, I don't think that I'm far away from it with the right, you looking at the company for the resources that we have, the reasons of why we would, and then the relationships that we would bring into the company, that makes sense. Like I'm starting to see the vision. And we talk about it. I'm like, I don't know about this year. Like I see some of these things, and even so anyway, I'll digress on that part of it. But yeah, so I think that the statement is great from my awareness that that is part of what a CEO should do.
That's a great, that's a powerful, a courageous admission because I've said this recently on a podcast. Yeah, I'm the founder of Culture Matters. Where are my executives? To be the chief executive officer would infer that there's other executives that I'd be chief to. So we're in that together, learning, growing, right, as our organizations grow. Um, and it's not all founders become the CEO. Um, but can the founders that are listening to this, if they're interested, if they're willing to put in the work, learn how to be chief executive officers? Or are they more interested in someone buying them and implanting a manager of their company or some other scenario where they're not interested in that? But there will be someone that's doing it at some point if the organization is in business in the future. So I thought that was a strong. I think it opens up, really help the audience ask themselves those questions to figure out, what role do I have in in my organization today? What role do I want that they may never have thought about? There are, yeah, I think because I think it's one thing for someone to make a decision, like plan out and strategize and envision what the trajectory of their business is based on what they really want and their family wants versus react because it wasn't thought through based on what other people are presenting to them. And that might be the audience, at some point in their business, if they've started a business and they're not sure, you know, where am I taking this thing? I'm curious in closing, some of your thoughts on that.
Well, it really it's basically where I digressed at. In the past, it's always emotional, excitement, growing. Here's an idea that I have. Talk to about to 50 million people to get their impact, to shape it, share it, and not 50 million, but maybe 30 people,
Hmm.
and then move forward on an emotion rather than the flip side of looking at the business, looking at the resources. How much money do we have in savings? How much money do we forecast is coming in this year? What are our collectibles? What's our runway? What is our staff? What is our opportunity coming up? Does it make sense from a financial standpoint to what's our tax burdens going to be for this year, for the future years? Does it make sense to hire on executives? What training would they need? How would that look? What would be the involvement? How would it affect the culture? And so on and so forth. And what's the reason? Well, why? Well, then what would happen to me if this person was put on to staff? So these are things, and I will say that that's through what we're working through. That one about the resources really like clicked with me because I've never really considered. It's always like, this is what I want to do. We can do anything. This is how they'll justify their pay and move forward. Almost like, I won't say blindly, right? But I consider options and think about things. But when I'm emotionally considering it, it's like I miss things sometimes. And I'm
Hmm.
not saying that the CEO should be fearful, but the CEO should be informed, aware, and able to make educated decisions that have a minimal amount of risk to the whole company. So that's something that's been very impactful for me from a closing statement. But I will say before, because we're going to wrap up on the D and deny, to go back to the very first thing when we talked about like the inverse, because you looked at it differently. I put a instead of defend, I called it deny, right? Like, so the concept is that rather than standing up and being defend like a guardian would, you deny anything or everything, avoid conflict at all times. Um, denying the processes and procedures and the values of the guardian culture. Do the action that would make you the most comfortable in the short term, right? Like, just deny everything, try to make everything. It's like I was talking about, like that old school mindset. So, that I say old school, my past experiences, I wouldn't call that an old school value of our society. But so that concept is that it's really avoidant. It's in alignment with what we're talking about, like having the discussions between sales and ops and issues and challenges before they rise up and before they become, longer term, bigger problems, and stuff like that goes on. But so that I just want to at least touch on that from a opposite of the way that I look at it is just deny everything, go for the quickest, shortest, easiest thing. Don't worry about any repercussions of how that's going to impact or affect people. And it's something that definitely can cause an explosion in a business really quick. So in closing, I appreciate you bringing up the response and responsibility and role of a CEO, because it's where we're at. We're talking about these things, we're navigating through them, and it's always nice for me to be focused in that direction, because it's so easy because it's, and I'm not saying pulled back into like I'm out of it, but it's so easy to stay
Mm.
focused on the day to day and not even look up and above, like, all right, if there's going to be a change, because even that and I'll say that this will be my closing statement, that even the concept of hiring executive level, right? Sales, operations, marketing, HR, like having people that having the relationships that are going to take those roles over. And you talk about, this is the CEO, is to cast the vision from the top. I can see how that could be like, you're getting reports up, you're getting things from the staff and the team, but it sounds so like isolated, where
Mm.
I like to be in the business. I know that's a thing today. People say, like, don't be in the business, work on the business. And that's a reasonable statement, to a capacity. But yeah, it's still a little unclear. Like, all right, it sounds great to have somebody that's handling sales, somebody that's handling operations, somebody that's handling all HR hiring, handling marketing, handling technology. But when you really dig back into it, all right, do we have the resources to support that? Or do we have the sales that are coming in? Do we have the money? Or is that going to actually be a drain? And they're going to be like, what am I doing? Like, wondering, not have a real great purpose for what they're doing there, or having to build something. And they might not be that personality, right? That's going to build. They want to come into something that's established. Even just the hiring for all of those parts and all not part, those relationships are, it's very interesting for me. Like, I'm very cautious, thoughtful about it. I don't want to make the poor choices like I have in the past so many times. So
Mm.
that's my closing statement. Thank you, Jay.
If you're listening to this podcast, please share it with someone that you believe needs to hear it. Follow Robert. Leave us a review in the Culture Matters podcast. We will see you next time.